All right. Hello out there. Welcome everyone to another edition of Friday with Friends. And today's friend is Dr. Kathy Shea. Welcome, Kathy. It's good to be speaking with you again. You know, I think you were the first person that I ever spoke with on the Zoom. Welcome.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, wow. It seems like a long time ago, Craig.
It does. We were just in the beginning stages of pandemic.
That's right.
And that is fading away, but Zoom has remained. So, and that's probably something we discussed at that time, that life will never be the same again. So here we are. And of course, that fits in with today's theme. Is the title of today's talk is The Courage to be an Outlier. Now, for most Americans, that word may be a little bit seldom used in your vocabulary. I would guess it's more of an English thing to use. Is that a word that you use often in your vocabulary or daily activities, Kathy?
Yeah. Well, actually, I do in a mathematical sense. And I really had a chuckle when I heard the various interpretations of what that meant. So it'd probably be helpful if at least we describe what we mean when we're talking about outliers.
Well, why don't you describe a few of the definitions of the word outlier?
Well, the couple that amused me were, number one, it does have something to do with mathematics in terms of a set of numbers, the numbers that are at either end, for example. And someone said that it thought it might have something to do with lying or not telling the truth.
Right.
Outlier.
Yes, yes.
So we have some of those too. We have a lot of people who are outlying. And I think in my, in our conversation today, let's, maybe you and I can agree on what we're talking about. And I think of it as someone, as a person who's perhaps different or not following the crowd or
absolutely
being a little more their own person. Maybe.
Yes, absolutely.
How do you see it?
I see it exactly the same way, as someone who initially sees themselves as different, and perhaps that causes kind of a, why can't I be more like everyone else, and maybe not feeling so good about it. And so it's a change. Tell me, do you have any experience with the term outlier? Do you see yourself, or have you seen yourself in that sense at some point in your life?
Yeah, I see myself as an outlier. I'm certainly not mainstream in my lifestyle. I'm not mainstream in my thinking. And I think of course, I'm old now, but when I was young, that was a little bit of a problem for me. And I know I was sharing with you, I think earlier, that back in the day, if you were what we would call an outlier or different, and you were, when I was starting to work and you weren't really seen as a team player, you kind of did your own thing. I was always seen as a loner. And I prefer the term outlier, but a loner was what so that was troublesome then. And it was hard to advance in careers if you were in a corporation or a big organization.
Oh, absolutely.
As an outlier.
Absolutely.
Did you have that experience when you were, I mean, you're an artist.
Well, actually, it pays to be clueless. I was an outlier, but I didn't even know it, because I didn't have a sense of what I should be, because I was never brought up in any way to be a certain way. So as I grew, I recognized how different I was from my peers, but a little confidence goes a long way, is I find that's really the key for me in terms of reconciling with this idea of being an outlier. As I was thinking, as you said that about different, that back in the day, even way back in the day, in village life, the local shaman lived outside of town. He was an outlier by nature because they had a different type of life than everyone else, but yet it was different, but yet respected. Yeah. So this is the balance that, you know, we're going through. Different, embrace that, but also respected, and that it's something that I need to reconcile within myself first before I can get it from others.
Oh, Craig, I think that's so wonderful what you were saying about respect. And I tend to think there may be a gender difference here between women and men in those days of, you say you were clueless, you didn't even know you were an outlier. And, you know, maybe for women, I was thinking, you know, back in the day, even we're talking Women's History Month recently, and how to fit in and be accepted and be respected. We had to adopt. I remember having my work suits that had big shoulder pads, you know, and I wore a little tie. You know, we adopted some of those mannerisms, and it's so interesting to me the extent to which we try to fit in.
It is something, and it's still there. I mean, that still exists from the individuals or the part of society that is having a difficult time embracing change. Because an outlier are the ones that are telling you what's coming. You know, these are stories that come all the way through, you know, back, even you go biblical, like John the Baptist was an outlier, definitely, but yet people came. So they show the way to other people, even though they're not understood and perhaps in their own time not respected. So it does take courage to be an outlier. You have to have a very, very strong sense of self in order to do that.
I agree. There's a wonderful book by a nun, Sister Joan Chittister, where she talks about prophets, and prophets being outliers in the sense that they're not understood, they're often not respected, they don't try to fit in, and on the contrary, they're opposed.
Absolutely.
So you take the Brahmabhata, the founder of the bee case, for example.
Oh, it can't be more of an outlier that when you just think about the differences, and then whom were the people that carried his message were young girls and women, which is unheard of in that place at that time. It's really revolutionary. A revolutionary is the epitome of an outlier.
An outlier. That's profound, Craig. A revolutionary is the epitome of an outlier. So where does courage come into all this too?
Well, just think that you stand alone, that you might be such an outlier that you don't even have a family, because you even bring, maybe because of your outlierness, bring embarrassment or shame to your own family, and they're trying to change you. And so, in fact, it's much like the life of any true spiritual aspirant, that once you find out what the foundations of being that way are, you have to become so strong in that you're not dependent upon the approval of the masses in order to be the outlier, which, of course, I'd like to get to as we go on, that an outlier is not an outlier at all. It's only an outlier if you don't really fit in society and something's amiss with you. Otherwise, you're trying to find your true center. So that's all it is. An outlier is someone who's in the process of finding their true center. You know, another thing I was thinking is that we know this story of outlier and the importance of it ever since we were children, small children, because it's one of the main fables, the ugly duckling. The ugly duckling is the story of the outlier.
Mhm.
You didn't, no one fit in, it was ridiculed, in fact, had shame and embarrassment for being that way. And look at how it turned out.
Yeah, this idea of having their own truth. You used that analogy before of like hopping from branch to branch, kind of looking for it. And when we're seekers, and I used to think of myself that way, I was a seeker. And so I would dabble a little of this, and there's a little of that, and a little of the other. And there was a lot of interest,
Yes,
but no real commitment to any of it.
correct,
So,
correct.
but once you kind of settle in and something resonates and you find that truth, or you find the voice, or you're, as Wadi says often, people just want to express themselves in whatever form that looks like. Once you find a pathway to do that, then the hopping around kind of stops.
Where the real work begins, So there is a lot of great excitement and a sense of adventure in being a seeker. But just like some people with education, you could go and get degrees forever and change majors and get another degree, because the seeking is what was enjoyable, and then it takes courage to step outside that comfort and begin the real work of. It really shows that an outlier is no longer an outlier. Like, you start at one place, like another outlier, Galileo. The earth is not the center of the universe. That was the center. The sun revolved around the earth. So you could, in a way, say the sun was an outlier at that time from the perspective of the human beings. It went around. We were stationary. And then we didn't really realize the size and scope of the universe, of even our own solar system, that we're part of a process. And the true center was not where I was with my small limited thinking, but was somewhere else. So the sooner I get in line with the truth, the sooner I'm going to be happy.
And the sooner I'll realize that I think you said, there really are no outliers, right? There really aren't any.
We're all seeking. We're seeking in some way or another.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. You go ahead.
Well, I'm still thinking about what you said earlier regarding women, and that's still an issue, in our so-called advanced society. It's still that prejudice there, and you still have to be an outlier and in a way conform. And that's, of course, why the past half dozen years or so about a resurgence of bringing back America the way that used to be, which really means what I'm comfortable with and the way that it was where I was in charge, because those who are threatened by the outlier do not want to see that come to pass.
Yeah. Well, this is just sort of a little sidebar, but I was not surprised, but saddened to see that about 40% of the women in the workforce have either cut back their hours or left the workforce during the pandemic. And it will take a generation to get those gains back
that long
that women have made. Yeah. So, I mean, there's been a lot lost in the pandemic, and we have a ways to go on some of that. That was just a little aside to it, but there was this book by Malcolm Gladwell a while back called Outliers, and I had forgotten about it. I read it a long time ago, but one of the points he makes is that we think about the outliers. Many people say they're self-made, they're individual, independent. I'm a self-made woman, but he almost makes the case for the fact that there really are no outliers in terms of the context, the milieu in which we grew up, the influences that have shaped us, and even the courage that we have has been cultivated in us. It's maybe our natural quality, but it's been cultivated in us either by circumstance or by necessity or by some support. And ultimately, from a spiritual point of view, at the level of the spirit, there are no outliers. And it's not always pleasant to feel that you're an outlier if that comes along with being not accepted or feeling different.
Well, and the other side of it is, because of feeling not different, I kind of become a kind of a adamant about being the outlier. Like I want to be the other because to protest, because I don't like the status quo. And that's, as you've met my daughter, who is probably a completely different person since the last time you met, because she started middle school. And what I see is now it's a community. They're all a community of outliers banded together, because now you can't, I'm not sure if you know how deeply this whole thing of gender identification goes, that they don't even use pronouns anymore. And every sixth grader has their name they were born with and their preferred name. And they describe themselves very technically. It's amazing the depth with which they understand this idea. And the whole point of is not having prejudice against someone who is different.
Yeah,
that it's inclusive. So as strange as it may seem on the surface for all these changing of like he, she, it, they, what's behind it is a very positive and inclusive message that a whole new generation of people understand that the outlier is all of us. You know, just as no one is an outlier, we're all outliers. And the whole idea of this thing that was given to us, the courage to become an outlier, is really about being okay with that. It takes courage to accept myself as that. Once I'm in, I embrace it. It's fantastic. But getting there, how would you get across to younger people to show them the way to have courage to embrace themselves? What kind of wisdom would you impart to them?
Oh, I think they're going to impart the wisdom to us. Yeah, I was having this conversation with somebody just yesterday who asked me, what's all this cisgender stuff, you know? And I explained, you know, there's gender identity, sexual preference, and all these variations. And using the pronouns, I actually do that professionally when I'm doing work sometimes. And it says to the other that I understand, I accept, I'll listen. And so what I would say to the young people is keep talking, keep sharing, keep doing. And for people on our end of it, for parents and grandparents and so forth, we just have to listen. And to begin to, you know how that old saying, put yourself in another person's shoes. I hear it all the time from different communities of transgender individuals or African American individuals or recent immigrants. They all have a perspective and they all want to be heard. They all want to be understood.
This is probably why all this different thing, it started with African American and then on to all these other types of Americans. Now it's even gone deeper into the he, she, they, it, and all types of things that I never even considered, non-binary, you know, I never even heard these terms before, but they're talking very intelligently about it. They're not just, it's not a fad. It's, my daughter's very serious about the whole thing, and not to offend anyone, because you haven't been in their shoes and you don't know what it's like to be them, and they should be given respect. So in reality, the outliers are the ones who cannot embrace change. And so this is the new group that will be needed to coddle, even though we thought of, oh, those are the ones I want to escape and bring fairness and justice. It's really the reason that someone can't is because they're unable to see or deal with the feelings that come from embracing something that's beyond the comfortable. So maybe that what we're really dealing with as an outlier is having the courage to step out of my own comfort zone, my own little center, because my own center may be way out on a twig. If it's a tree of life, I'm out on a twig and I don't even know. I think that's my little branch is the tree of humanity, but I'm just on a twig. And so those who have share, and not in a way of, oh, I'm better than you, or I resent what you've done to us. It's almost like you have to embrace your accusers and say, come on along.
Come on along. That's great. And I think what we as older adults can do is support that, cheer them on, embrace their ideas, try to understand better from their perspective, and hold the space so that they can do whatever seeking they need to do. Remember, we're talking about seeking.
Yes.
There's a lot of seeking going on. And until, whether it's now or next week, until they, or whenever, years from now, until they have enough freedom to find themselves back with themselves, then we're always going to have these divisions and this, disharmony. But the young people, they're the answer to it. They're not outliers. They're the future. They're the seed.
It's really it's a generation of outliers, and these are the best and brightest, and that's how they're looking at things, and they're taking offense at people who are prejudiced or sexist or racist or anything of that nature. Yeah. They really and they call people down on it immediately. I was surprised how strong they are in it all. But very impressed at the same time. It was a positive recognition on my part.
Yeah, they're very hopeful despite everything. They're very hopeful. They're, I would say, even optimistic, even at the time that they're also very realistic about the problems that we face. So, and they have the energy. They have the energy to move the whole country forward, the whole world forward.
So back to us.
Back to us. Okay.
That's where it's the only thing I can really change. Is there any where's left for you personally to move towards your center so that you become that which you have envisioned?
Mm.
Do you feel pull at all from the old way of being? Is there an old part of Kathy that still has?
Of course. Because
so there's the courage. See, that's where the courage comes in. Say,
yeah.
I want to make it real for me. I can understand for everyone. I can appreciate. But then when I look at myself, I see, well, maybe just in the mistakes that I make in relationships to others, and that I maybe use words or feelings that cause distress for someone else, I've stepped away. And so now I have to have the courage to get back to my own center. So for me, I think it is that these concepts of being a certain way that we learn in Raja Yoga about being my truest and purest self, in many ways, I understand that intellectually, but I'm still in process of seeking that. And sometimes I'm a little put off by my supposed shortcomings. And so then I have a little bit of reluctance to confront myself on that. But something that you said gave me hope is that to hold space for myself, just as I would hold space for my daughter in her seeking that she'll go through many generations of herself in order to find herself. Am I still doing that now? Or do I think that I've stopped learning, which then I face the danger of no longer being relevant in life? And of course, that's my definition of aging. Is
No
aging is
relevant.
you lose relevance. And
Wow.
so where you look at, one of my favorite human beings of all time, Daddy Yankee, relevant at every moment of her life because she kept embracing change all the time. So, and encouraging others, and what encourages but courage. So it's really, Waddy was correct. We've been this idea of courage, and everything comes up. Everything that we do that has change involved in it does take courage. And some of these are very subtle. Just the conversation with you takes a certain amount of courage. We have to decide how vulnerable I want to be in order to experience change within myself. I'd like this conversation to affect me permanently in my life. And so I have to be willing to put myself in that place to be that outlier who says, well, I've never seen anyone do this. I don't have anyone showing me the way except these examples of great individuals, which are not separate from me. They're all of us. We all can be that same thing. Everyone as a human being go through the same things that we're going through. It's just the decisions that we're making at any little point in time that are creating my future.
Amen.
Speaking to the choir. Speaking
Amen
to the choir.
Amen. Well, you're a good one for Friday with Friends because you're friendly and you're very open and accepting and curious and interested. And so I think those are great qualities of friendship that will carry us.
Oh, it's self-benefit.
Yeah.
I've recognized how much benefit there is for me and I don't have to worry about my flaws. I'm allowed to, I hide in plain sight, really. So if you're worried about how you look in the process of change, you don't have to. No one's looking. They're on their cell phones.
Yeah.
It is, and that's really the truth. And so, see, I saw that one time. I do dancing, and I've been at dance competitions, and maybe I'm on the floor doing something, and maybe I thought, oh, it went really well. And then you see the people in the audience, no one was watching. They're on their cell phones, taking selfies of themselves, saying, look at me, I was here, but they weren't there. So that gave me such freedom that, wow, I can practice in front of everyone. I don't have to be perfect. So there's no need to carry unnecessary anxiety because you could do whatever you want to do. It's okay. So just all I have to do is be vulnerable and do the best that I'm capable of doing now. So maybe that's the only courage I need to be. And that in itself, in our society, is an outlier. To be 65 and act 6. It's really, there's no difference. Are you the same person you were when you were 6?
Sure.
Yes, you are. You have the same ability of feeling. You have the same heart, same everything. Yes. So that means everyone is. So if I treat everyone in that same way, well, they're going to look at me very nicely because I'm looking at them.
They're going to look at you like you look at them.
Yes, yes. And it's so rewarding to make connect. Don't you find this conversation rewarding?
Of course.
Yeah, I do.
Of course.
Yeah.
All right.
So let's close with a little commentary meditation. And if you would take us through that, just like 2 or 3 minutes at the very most, just to kind of settle us and leave us the essence of what it means to have the courage to be an outlier.
Let's take a moment to settle ourselves down. Lots of ideas that passed through Zoom and into our heads. And I take a moment to experience myself a pure point of energy in this body. I experience myself as a current of energy that runs throughout me and gives me life. It gives me power. But most important, that current is connected to a source from which I can draw love, peace, any quality I feel I need at any time. At times when I feel different or out of sorts or less than or doubt, I return my attention to that current that gives me life and is connected to the source of all energy, of all qualities. And I'm able to share that current. I'm able to connect with others from that source. And so I realize through that source that we are all connected. Internally, through our spirit. And when connected, we share those same qualities with each other and the world. And we can bring about a world of peace and harmony through love. Om Shanti.
Shanti. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Craig.
And thank you for...
Happy Easter.
Thank you. I'm going to...
Passover. Just past Holy, so happy spring.
Everything at once. All right. It's a pleasure speaking with you. I look forward to seeing you again. Bye.
Om Shanti. Bye-bye.